Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And this week we have a really important milestone to celebrate for the show, for the world, really. It's really just kind of a worldwide. I found out because of just sitting here looking at this. This is we're in the 20th Baja-versary here.
What does that mean? What?
I believe that's like the 20th anniversary of Baja Blast. I'm sitting here. It seems to be, I think it is now a non-limited edition flavor. It's just going to be on the shelves 24/7.
Okay.
So happy Baja-versary for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, happy Baja-versary. That used to be a Taco Bell exclusive.
Yeah, remember you had to go remember you had to drive through the Bell to get a Baja Blast?
Yeah,
now it's in your own home.
Days. That's amazing. And honestly, I'm going to be completely real here. Like, I don't really drink soda anymore. When I was in high school, I liked Mountain Dew. I was a gamer. You know, we were both gamers. We're still gamers.
I played a round of Fortnite in the past 24 hours.
Well, it's like I used to drink, we've mentioned on the show how we would step and drink a bunch of Mountain Dew and play video games. Just like the most stereotypical, nerd high schooler gamer thing ever. Like, we did that a lot.
Our variation on doing like mixing beer and shots was to mix Mountain Dew and then do espresso shots at like 2 a.m.
That was
oof.
I'm so far removed from that time in my life. But what I wanted to say, and this is kind of like a confession. All right, I still fuck heavily with Baja Blast.
It's just good. Like,
it's just good.
It's a good flavor. I enjoy it. It's really sweet. Like, you can't like fucking down a bunch of them, but they're really good.
No, but like, I rarely make it out to Taco Bell anymore, but like, it is like one of my main fast food places if I need fast food. And if I go to Taco Bell, I'll get a fucking Baja Blast. I'll admit it. I mean, I most of the time I'm drinking water and seltzer. But yeah, Baja Blast still fills a little gamer hole in my heart.
Yeah. Everyone's got that little gamer hole in their heart that gets slowly bigger as they consume more and more Mountain Dew.
Yeah, and leads to heart disease eventually. Everybody, happy Baja-versary. This is a great celebratory episode. And to celebrate, we're going to talk about the death of a Scientologist psychic.
As is traditional, it's much like singing Christmas carols on Christmas.
Right.
On the Baja-versary, you talk about the death of a Scientologist. That's it's tradition.
Yeah, exactly. L. Ron Hubbard, I think, may have invented Baja Blast. So, he got to pay tribute.
He went into a Taco Bell in Utah where they specialize in sodas because they can't. They don't drink alcohol.
No alcohol.
Wait, he wasn't in Utah. I'm conflating some shit. Anyway,
but you're thinking of Mormons.
He just came up with Baja Blast. Yeah, I realized that. I wasn't going to say it because it was a really fucking stupid thing to realize that I was conflating.
They're similar enough. But yeah, this week we're going to finish the story of Pat Price, psychic extraordinaire, who was supposedly able to remotely view missile test sites and other secret locations on behalf of Stargate Project and the CIA. In fact, lots of people who were involved with these projects and supposedly even CIA guys were like blown away by this guy's ability, supposedly.
just fucking floored by this man.
Yeah.
This man can see everything as long as you don't need it to be highly verifiable.
Yeah. So this is part 2. So go back to episode 389 if you haven't heard it already. And like hopefully you've been following this series, which we have been calling Psychic Winter, where I have been like diving deep into people connected to Stargate Project, this like official US government and military and CIA investigation into psychic abilities. Men who stare at goats type shit, which we haven't even gotten to that aspect of the project. But the connections will start to pop up in this episode. So again, part 2, go back to 389 if you haven't heard it already. And we left off in part 1 with this unbelievable story of a Scientologist psychic scooped up by the CIA, who then mysteriously ends up dead in a hotel room and then is unceremoniously, he's effectively disappeared in a way. Like his death is reported. There's, it's known, but he's, the body is taken and cremated before the wife is contacted. There's some other suspicious stuff. So the question becomes,
so they straight up just like remove this guy. Like if the conspiracy is to be believed, the conspiracy is that they completely covered up his actual death, including burning up the body.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. The question of like you've pointed out, is it a natural death or did somebody kill him, and if so, why? And like on the natural death end of things, he supposedly had, or not supposedly, but like I believe he actually had heart disease. So I don't know what heart disease, but he had like heart issues. Mm-hmm. And so like the official story is like, well, he had a heart attack. He fucking died from a heart attack because he has heart issues. That makes sense. However, I want to get into some things that make it a little weirder, which is, why do you think we call the show what it's called?
Yeah, honestly, so, we were very prescient by giving ourselves an unintentional name drop of our show halfway through every episode.
Yeah. It does what it says on the tin. So right off the bat, I'd like to say that we don't know if Price was killed at all. Like we can't confirm that at all. But there are some odd things surrounding his death.
I thought you meant I for just a flash of a second, I was like, so this guy could still be alive? No, we just don't know if he was killed. He could have died of natural causes.
Now here's the thing.
This man, is this a fucking Elvis situation?
One of the conspiracies does say, and this is based off of basically nothing other than he was Actually, I'll start off with this. So in the documentary that I was watching, Third Eye Spies, which, Niall, I think maybe we should watch it together for the show at some point.
Sure.
Because it's interesting. In it, there's literally a part where Targ goes to visit with Uri Geller, Russell Targ, who is the SRI researcher working with these guys, and Uri Geller is one of the subjects in the early 70s. And he goes up to Uri Geller and he's like, you were like specially connected with the CIA and intelligence organizations. I was hoping maybe you could tell me about what happened to Pat Price, my friend. And Uri Geller, like, he basically says, okay, I'll summarize it like this. He says something along the lines of killing Pat Price, killing somebody with the abilities that Pat Price had, is like killing the goose that lays the golden egg. They would not kill a person who had such unbelievable powers, is basically what he's saying. And so that sort of like thread of conspiracy is very simply, he's still alive. His death was faked so he could continue to do like hyper secret operations for the CIA.
So he's chilling down with like the Montauk chair in one of the fucking deep underground military bases or some shit.
Yes, it's stuff like that. Okay. So that is, but there's literally nothing to go on there, right? There's just no information.
Yeah,
which is how
that
is
purely they value him so highly that they wouldn't have killed him. Therefore, like it is a total leap. Okay.
Yes, but what I love about Uri Geller and Targ talking about this is Uri Geller says something so juicy, stupid, sweet, just really dumb, that feels, I feel like he knows he's saying something stupid on purpose. I don't know. He looks Targ in the face and says, the CIA is not in the business of killing people. And that is just... so reads incorrect.
Like, you know that Twitter meme that goes around that's like tweet something that if it were to appear on your timeline, people would know you've been kidnapped. You know?
Sure, yeah.
Like that feels like one of those things. You know,
yes.
The CIA isn't actually they don't usually just kill people.
It's
it's
a ridiculous thing to say. It's a ridiculous thing to say. But that's what happens in the documentary. Also, I want to mention some things that I didn't mention in our first episode because there's some interesting, weird stories about him while he was with SRI and the CIA that run. I don't want to. They're a little. They run a little. They're in a little bit in tension with this story of this like psychic super spy, in my opinion, as a skeptic. Also, I mentioned a book called Remote Viewers: The Secret History of America's Psychic Spies, written by Jim Schnabel. And I had previously watched a documentary Schnabel was involved in about the so-called Real X-Files that was basically the same subject with a similar title. And I'm happy to say, Niall, that the book has finally been delivered to my house today.
Hell yeah.
Which is like, I was taking some last-minute stuff out of this, and I'd like to read through it and actually, because it seems amazing.
Throw that bad boy up there again. I want to see that looks like a good,
it's a good old school cover. Yeah,
we've got kind of the like stencily text. You've got the war photography with fucking eyeballs poked through it, so it looks like it's actually command stripes when it's smoke. That's just great.
It's good, and it is like 400 pages.
Hell yeah!
So it's got a lot of info in here, and there's a lot. I keep tugging at strings and finding just a million more things that pop out.
You're really going to try to make Psychic Winter into Psychic Spring at this point.
Like I said, I don't know whether I want to actually do that because I think at a certain point I'm going to have to take a break from this subject and then just come back to because they do, and a lot of these things can stand alone, but referencing back to these things is going to be great.
Having a chunk that we can point to as go back to Psychic Winter and you'll get the baseline to get to these future episodes is a good thing to be able to point to. So
yes, I agree. So I'm happy to have this book, and I'm sure find more stuff in there that I didn't include in this episode. But just a cursory skim gave me new information about others involved in the project. One of the big things that I'm going to probably have to cover in an episode that's like an overview of all of this, and in particular the Scientology involvement and stuff. But one thing that the book talks about is how there seems to have been heavy competition in these tests and projects between Ingo Swann and Pat Price, which I find very interesting.
A little friendly camaraderie, or were they like rivals?
It feels like at times it becomes rivalry.
Did they go full like Prestige, where they're trying to like sabotage each other's experiments and shit?
Well, okay. Well, look, we're gonna get into it. So
okay,
some of that will be relevant.
I'll let the story unravel. That's fine.
So, I want to I think some of the juicier tidbits will be in like an overview episode, but there's some interesting stuff here. So, this is stuff about Pat Price that I kind of noticed it doesn't show up as often in online discussions of the story. Like usually it's people talking about what a great psychic spy is and all the stuff that I talked about in episode 1. This stuff throws a little bit of a curveball in the story if you are skeptical. I mean, obviously already you're working from skepticism with the whole idea of remote viewing.
Yes.
But he has more strange beliefs than people are willing to talk about sometimes. So I had mentioned some of this stuff, like how he claims to have, in the documentary they bring this up, he claims to have had this like supernatural or psychic assistance in solving police cases while he was working as a police officer, or like them coming into one of the CIA guys coming into like to his desk and finding him like supposedly mapping out like the location of all nuclear submarines in the world, which is fucking crazy. But what they don't talk about is some other stuff. So like, for instance, that nuclear submarine thing, that information seems to come from, and I read this in the remote viewer's book when I skimmed it, That seems to come from him claiming that he had a lot of out-of-body experiences, and he would often go out of body and like psychically view things such as nuclear submarines while flying over the ocean.
Right. Okay.
So out-of-body experience, that stuff. But he also claims to have possessed the, quote, ancient shamanic power of weather changing by, quote, creating or evaporating clouds at will.
Oh, so he can cloud bust.
So he can cloud bust with like his will, with his mind. He also claims that he could make traffic lights change through psychokinesis, which I'm sure was very convenient when he had to get to the office or he had to go meet up with Puthoff at an L. Ron Hubbard lecture or whatever.
But did he make sure to like change the ones going the opposite direction too, or did he just like accidentally one time just make everything green and just cause a fucking pile up?
That's actually one of the weird things that people don't bring up is the record of car crashes in this guy's life is like it's unbelievable. No, it doesn't really elaborate on that, but
I guess it's all bullshit. But
I guess he could just do that is what he claimed. And I think the weirdest little fact of all is that he claimed to be the reincarnated soul of Patrick Henry, who was an American politician and orator in the 19th century. This is the give me liberty or give me death guy, by the way.
Right.
Colonial guy. So, yeah, a lot of weird beliefs that he has as he, like, before joining SRI. Like, he was already a very strange guy. Now, notably, he also seemed to strongly believe in the existence of UFOs, aliens, and an extraterrestrial presence on Earth. He believed that aliens had bases on Mars, the moon, and on Earth. And these bases, according to Price, were all over the place, including underwater and beneath mountain ranges. Now, apparently, shortly after joining the project, Price reportedly told Puthoff that he was certain about the existence of one of these alien bases underneath Alaska's Mount Hayes. But this wasn't any alien Earth base. He claimed it was one of the largest on the planet.
Okay. So we have a really big... Where's Mount Hayes? Sorry.
It's like north of Anchorage, I believe, in Alaska.
Okay.
So
I mean, like, that's a remote enough place that fucking, if you're going to have a big base, sure, why not? Like,
yeah.
This falls under, I don't believe you, but there's some logic to it. All right.
Yeah. Now, while I think Schnabel's book offers a more skeptical telling of Price's UFO-based thing, which it is in there, the places where this gets talked about online seem to be among a lot of communities of true believers. So like these stories don't pop up in people who are like trying to like scientifically vouch for the existence of psychokinesis, right? Like, it's normally in like new age, spiritual, a lot of circles like that. One of those places happens to be a disastrously terrible conspiracy website I'm not even going to name because I don't want to give it traffic. Suffice to say, it peddles in only the most fucked up and racist conspiracies possible. But for some reason, I found it also has an archive of articles written by various people from the late 90s and early 2000s on a lot of weird topics. So it's really terrible. So I'll have to send it to you offline, as it were, because it's got a lot of stuff on it. But
yeah,
on it, I found this writer, Cassandra Sandy Frost.
Wait, is Sandy in like quotation marks
yes.
nickname? Okay.
Yes. And I also found a website that was like, this is, again, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here. I found a website that was like it was like an expose of this particular psychic that was like a satirical and honestly very angry and mean website, just like making fun of this psychic. This self-described psychic. And they even have an article that is like a joke article claiming to be written by this same woman, Sandy. And the article that they wrote, it says, they proudly present this parody of a rambling and incoherent article entitled Why I Do What I Do by Cassandra Sandy Frost, pseudonym for Sandra Sandy Kreider. And it's titled Why I Am a Big Pain in the Ass. And Like it's so mean. It like the first sentence says, "I'm a pissant spin doctor posing as a big time objective psychic investigative reporter." Now this lady, she seems to have investigated remote viewing in the late 90s. So that's why she's here. But like whoever had this website that I had to find on the Internet Archive is like, just like, I want to make fun of psychics.
Yeah.
it's very funny.
This is the most like blunt satire. Like it's satire that's not at all attempting to sound like the person it's putting through.
Yeah.
It's just dunking on this person.
It's just literally,
right.
I'm a big idiot fucking dummy. Like that's all it is. It's nothing. So, basically, I got this information from one of her articles about Price's UFO bases. And according to her, this all comes from the account and the analysis of Lieutenant F. Holmes Skip in quotations, Atwater. And Atwater was, so he's another strand in this huge web of Stargate Project stuff. But for now, let's just say he was the founder of the U.S. Army remote viewing unit that took off in 1977 as Gondola Wish after the supposed success of all the SRI research and operational stuff, and things got handed over to the military, and they got involved. So Atwater is going to be an absolutely vital name in future episodes on this stuff, but I don't want to get too deep into him yet. So, also, side note on this author, Cassandra Frost, Sandy, she seems to write about a lot of different Fortean and paranormal subjects, but one of her big fixations that I could find when I look her up is the Shriners, which they're
like the little cars, little car people.
Car people. I don't know what that.
And the Shriners, aren't they the ones that drive the little cars and parades?
Oh, you know what? Maybe because they're the Masonic Society based out of Tampa.
Yeah. Okay. So
I think that's the same people. I think.
I don't know much about cars?
It. Yeah, I don't. They got the little like fezzes, right? I don't really know much about it, but she's like about exposing the secrets of the Shriners or whatever. So I don't know.
All right. Like if you're gonna make any tactic to try to make your organization seem non-nefarious, like and simple, then being like a kind of a punchline in small town parades is a pretty good way to cover yourself up.
Tiny hats and little tiny cars. That's pretty fun. I wouldn't think to investigate that organization for like conspiracy secrets and shadow government stuff. So, but apparently this woman did think of that. So, but yeah, it's a whole different thing. She wrote one of these articles on Price and the UFO bases, and according to her, Price, one day in 1973, presumably during or shortly after the early tests at SRI, walked into Puthoff's office and threw a file onto his desk saying, "You might be interested in these UFO bases." And just a little note here, there's a lot of unsourced claims throughout this article and many of the other places talking about his bases, like the UFO stuff. It just really, I think I'm going, like when I actually read this remote viewer's book, that will probably give me a better understanding of what actually happened here. But I just haven't had time to read 400 pages yet. So
yeah, it makes sense.
So yeah, lots of unsourced stuff. But supposedly Price had written up a report on 4 underground UFO bases that he had remotely viewed and compiled data on, describing location and function of each one. And what exactly was written in these reports, I can't totally say since they don't seem to exist anywhere. And this was like off the record, unofficial stuff too. But that is the story. Anyways, so apparently Puthoff passed these papers to Atwater sometime in the early 1980s, again, according to this article. But another account claims that Price actually passed on this report to Atwater himself. So that would be much earlier since Price died in 1975. This alternative account comes from a snippet taken from the UK magazine X Factor in issue 85 from May 2000, and here's what it says. Quote, Pat Price, one of the world's best remote viewers, conducted a private search which located and described 4 bases, which were manned by extraterrestrials. Price showed this to Skip Atwater, one of the Army remote viewers, But since his search was performed privately and there was no way of verifying its accuracy, it was filed away for 10 years until Atwater, who was then training viewers for the Army, used it as a target for trainees. None of these subjects knew anything about what Price had found, but when the viewing was completed, they described the same details about the bases. So that's
okay.
Now that's taking an ex-military guy's word for it on this one.
Yeah.
But that's supposedly what happened. Now, here's what I got from Frost's article on Price and the UFO bases. So, apparently, he claimed that the bases, that they're like, what they were doing was to quote unquote reinforce BTL implants, transport new recruits, and overall monitoring. Now, apparently, this BTL implants thing, Atwater doesn't know what that meant.
I was about to ask the same thing, so I guess, do you have an answer on what a BTL implant is?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
So, these things were working with these, like, they wanted to reinforce BTL implants, transport new recruits, and monitor things. That's what these alien bases are doing. And Atwater doesn't know what this means. And according to Atwater, nobody ever remotely viewed the term BTL implant anywhere. But Price's account of what he saw on the base is that the aliens look effectively like Homo sapien. Something what he does say that like is different is that there's something different about their hearts, their lungs, their blood, and their eyes. What that is, I don't know entirely. But he claims that they were also heavily shielded. These bases. In fact, you mentioned earlier like what the Swan Price rivalry kind of looked like.
Yeah.
Apparently, when Price brought this stuff to Puthoff and was talking about it at SRI, they asked Swan to confirm these bases using remote viewing. And Swan's response to that was basically, I don't want to do it because they might like realize that it's me psychically spying on them, and then they might spy on me in turn. So
that is always a problem when you're dealing with psychic surveillance. Like, if they catch your vibes, then they're going to know it's you, and you're going to get spied on back.
So either they're, it's like a trap for him to psychically like probe these alien bases, or he's going like, I don't want to back up Price's claims. I don't want him to be the better remote viewer.
Yeah, you don't want to be the person that corroborates someone else's claims.
Yeah.
You want to be the guy that makes the bold claims first, because then that's where the money is.
Yes. And there's this weird note here that Price says that they could, quote, use thought transfer for motor control of us being humans. The aliens that are in these bases were all not only shielded, but they were all sort of supporting each other and had extremely advanced technology. So he named the locations and kind of gave an overview of what these are. And this is also an account that's coming from Atwater as written by Sandy here. So supposedly the first base is at Mount Perdido in the Pyrenees Mountains between France and Spain. And Atwater says, quote, a famous set of caves in the Pyrenees have ancient drawings of ancient astronauts and flying spacecraft, and there have been a number of sightings here. And so supposedly, this is according to Atwater, there had been UFO sightings in the area, and that the craft that were supposedly seen there, there is like some suggestion that they had an electromagnetic field propulsion system. What that's based off of, I don't know, but that's what it says.
Okay.
Now, Price says that the second underground base location, this is at Mount Inyangani, which is the, I guess, highest mountain in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, Africa. And Price says, quote, actually, it's more of a maintenance and tech center. This base looks like overhaul and maintenance unit. I see lots of spare equipment. Parts are being welded in a vacuum area with window area, then parts are fused. A grayish-white powder is pasted on both parts, then fused. And I guess, was like very focused in his remote viewing on a unit that was being worked on by aliens there, which he describes as being this tubular grid system that was for, quote, ionizing a layer of air. Then the third site I mentioned before was Mount Hayes, Alaska. And he describes it as basically this like geological and weather center, and also being heavily shielded by psychic interference. And he talks about there being computer equipment and some sort of oscilloscope that leads into this small box structure that had this, like, inside it had this like rotational antenna that sat on top of a mountain peak. And he says that this was maybe some sort of detection system.
Okay.
He says, here's Price, what he actually says. He says, quote, if they were discovered, personnel are deployed are deployed physically in activity to make sure of failure of that certain project. This site has also been responsible for strange activity and malfunction of U.S. and Soviet space projects.
Huh.
So there's an alien base in Zimbabwe that is like interfering with space projects of the U.S. and the Soviet Union, according to him.
And yeah, like, I guess the question would be why, but like, I guess we're dealing in this case with aliens just kind of playing spoiler to a lot of our stuff. So they're just trying to keep our very advanced American space program and Russian space program from. So do they fuck with like the Chinese space program too, or is it just?
This is the Cold War, so we're very focused on the U.S. and the Soviet Union. So I didn't see anything about the Chinese space program or anything.
Yeah, probably didn't have one or have a robust one at that point.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm back.
Nothing about that, but I believe this quote comes from Atwater, and he says, it comes to mind that these people have infiltrated all government and sensitive positions, not to control government, the processes, or people, but rather to be in positions of power to stop politically any activity that may produce a result that could cause discovery. So high government is infiltrated by aliens to prevent aliens from being discovered on Earth, basically.
Okay.
Then the fourth site that Price mentions is Mount Zeal in Australia's Northern Territory. And he says, quote, it is interesting that this unit appears to have the most personnel. They are personnel from the other three sites here, like a rest and recreation area. Which apparently in the middle of like remotely viewing this particular location, Price claims to have felt somewhat disoriented and thought that maybe they detected him. And so he kind of like dips during this remote viewing session, and then returns later and claims to have seen vehicles that were from other bases that had different ID marks that sort of corresponded with the different sites that he was viewing. And he says, quote, Mount Zeal had personnel for all bases and is the Homo sapiens introduction point. He also said that this particular site needed to be approached with caution, and that the area at the time of remote viewing was under alert.
So there's vehicles and shit from all bases. So this is like an all hands on.
It's like a communal point.
Yeah. Okay. So this is like the main fucking hub that everything else is kind of.
And not only that, but he makes it sound like this is the place where if you are a human who's going to be inducted into whatever this alien program is, this is where it would happen. So shouts out to Australia.
Yeah. So this is where the big boys play. All right.
Yeah. Which I'm trying to remember where it was, but I do remember reading about the like secret NSA US site in Australia. I forget
at Pine Gap.
Yeah, Pine Gap. That's right. I think you're right. Yeah,
because I did a whole thing. There's a bunch of stuff about like deep underground military base at Pine Gap and shit. Yeah, and they do a lot of like radio projects and shit there.
It just makes me wonder if like he knew about that stuff somehow, or had like read about something, or if maybe this predates it. I really don't know. I can't remember. but it did make me think of that. So Lieutenant Atwater's analysis of this stuff and how it would influence the military's remote viewing program is really interesting in and of itself, but we can't talk about that this episode without getting into an entirely different set of stories.
Okay.
Suffice to say, I think it's quite interesting how little Price's UFO and shamanistic New Age beliefs get brought up. Like I kind of said, to a skeptic, this would look pretty bad, but it probably doesn't look so bad to a Scientologist, right? Like,
I don't think that this would be that out of pocket for them.
No, and speaking of Scientology, there's also this weird mention of BTL implants. A term...
I gotta know what the fuck that means, because I'm only coming up with BBL, which is not anything I'm assuming.
This is where all the aliens are going to get their Brazilian butt lifts.
Get fucking cheeked up. All right.
So, no.
Make them things clap from across the galaxy.
This is like, this term, I guess, befuddled Atwater, and like, I guess like people discussing this stuff online would also be like, what the fuck is a BTL implant? Atwater had no idea what this meant, but guess what? I know what it means. And would you fucking believe it? This is an odd abbreviation of the term between lives implants.
Between lives?
Between lives. So this is a concept.
What the fuck does that mean?
It's ripped directly from L. Ron Hubbard, specifically from his book, The History of Man. And it also seems to be pulling from a 1952 taped lecture called The Role of Earth. Like ROLE.
Okay.
So Price not only borrows this between lives implants idea, but also seems to be using locations mentioned by Hubbard in this book and lecture. Like genuinely these like specific locations he's saying these bases are at are like points of interest in the story that whatever the story is that Hubbard is trying to tell. And I don't want to get too deep into the really batshit stuff here from L. Ron Hubbard, and I think it would be better to talk about it in an episode going over the whole Scientology connection to all of this. But
yeah, we'll cover that in our Battlefield Earth deep dive.
Yeah. Well, basically, you can liken it to a lot of Starseed stuff, it seems to me, on like first glance. But you like replace elevated consciousness with OT levels, the operating thetan. Which is the whole Scientology thing. I'm not capturing the nuance here, but it's a lot about reincarnation and like prison planet style stuff where we're fighting like these dark extraterrestrial forces or whatever. It's a whole thing.
You're doing whatever their version of light work is to try to dispel the dark energies and shit.
Which is getting operating thetan levels, which involves study and money. But like, point is, all of the things that he said here that people were going along with that seems to have really bolstered a lot of military UFO stuff is just taken from L. Ron Hubbard. So we'll go over it again someday in the Scientology and Stargate overview episode. Someday that'll happen. So anyways, yeah, Price wasn't just a bona fide psychic with a political and police background. He believed some seriously fucking wild bullshit and was heavily influenced by Scientology. And don't forget,
if you weren't already kind of like worried about passing the sniff test before, when he was just an ex-cop and a psychic
and a
viewer,
mayor,
wait till you get to the fucking. Wait till you hear about his Scientology connections.
Oh my god, he's just like a fucking cornucopia of distrustworthiness. And don't forget how obviously Puthoff, Swan, and Price fucking lied about how they originally met. And how there's like multiple stories about that because they probably don't want the connection of Scientology to be the like common denominator of why they were funded by the CIA. But it is, I will say, Price's connection to Scientology is actually very important to understanding the conspiracy surrounding his death. So let's talk about that. So here's what we know about Price's death. And I got this stuff from a lot of sources. So there's the Third Eye Spies documentary that was produced by Russell Targ himself from SRI. But somebody better at Googling than me needs to tell me if I just missed something here. But there's this guy, Terry Milner, who apparently wrote a book called The Death of Pat Price. Anytime I looked into this book, I could not find anything about a full text or a copy that you could get anywhere. I just found this specific snippet, and it made me think that maybe it's actually just an article, and it got published as an article, but like this Milner person had intentions of writing a book. I don't know, but this is like I had to go into archives of websites to find some of this stuff. But so I was only ever able to find this like article that was called "The Death of Pat Price" that was supposedly from a book. Couldn't find the book.
Okay.
But some of the details are overlap with the documentary as well. So here's the story, basically. Towards the end of his life in 1975, Pat Price supposedly began to act strangely. And remember, he ended up leaving SRI and was kind of working with the CIA in some capacity. There's all these stories of like I said, he was like considered to be this star pupil of the SRI tests and operations. He was able to remotely view all, like I mentioned, the Russian base that he supposedly was able to see, although there's some problems with that, right? But
yeah,
there's a bunch of other stuff. Like there's a bunch of other stories of things. It's not that important, but there's a bunch of stories of him supposedly helping out the CIA or the military or whatever on this project to find things that they wanted found. Again, a bit tenuous. So
yeah. All of this is hearsay. All of this is like
it's all very questionable. So accounts of Price during this time in the Milner article are credited to a former Marine vet going by the name Frank Perlman. And I don't think this is supposed to be his real name. And apparently after Price's death, Perlman like stepped back from trying to investigate the story. But I don't know who Frank Perlman is. I don't think that's his real name. Like I said, I didn't like necessarily make a connection to him being somebody. It's just like, okay, so like in the documentary, Puthoff and Targ and those guys talk about the account of what happened. This article claims there's a Marine vet who knew Pat Price well and knows the last 2 days of his life very well. I wish I knew more. I'm again.
You didn't track down this vet to talk to?
This is one of those things I'm really hoping will get clarified by reading this book here. The Schnabel book. So eventually,
yeah.
And when I do, I'll make a note of talking about it in the overview episode of all this stuff. So apparently, Price, according to this guy Perlman, had flown from West Virginia to Washington, D.C. And while he was in D.C., he meets with folks from the Office of Naval Intelligence and the NSA. And these were people who were, I guess, also involved with his work with the SRI project. He never tells Perlman like what they did at these meetings, what they talked about, and what specifically they worked on. He just tells Perlman that he met with these people. He also tells Perlman that he had documents with him and that he was going to be in Las Vegas eventually, and that if anything were to happen to him, he wanted Perlman to basically save these documents and then send them to Puthoff before police took it.
Okay.
So again, very suspicious if this is what happened.
Yeah, like God. These are always the thing. Like the mysterious deaths are something that I always kind of struggle with because like who am I to say that the CIA didn't kill somebody? But at the same time, like there's so much fucking hearsay and speculation around all of these that like I never know where to fall on this stuff.
Yeah, I don't either. This is honestly like this part of the account isn't really what like sets off my like red flag alarm in my brain. This stuff is just like, wow, that's really weird if it's true,
Yeah.
So Price then flies from DC to Salt Lake City. And this, I think, is actually true. Okay.
it's true enough that basically everybody in the documentary says that this stuff happened, but he just like he flies to meet with his son. He like meets up with family before going to Vegas. He spends a few hours in Salt Lake City to see this family. The Milner article mentions that according to Perlman, oh my God, it really is so much. He said this, they said that. It's ridiculous. But Perlman supposedly claims that Price's son had some sort of position on President Gerald Ford's White House staff, which they just mentioned. I don't know whether that matters at all, but apparently it's like a weird little thing. Who knows? Another connection. Who knows?
All right.
And these meetings that Price had with his family and with the people in D.C. and all that were July 13th, 1975. And then the next day, Price ends up in Vegas around like sometime in the mid-afternoon. And Frank, our source on this stuff, goes and picks Price up at the airport, and he's accompanied by his wife, Sherry. So Frank and Sherry Perlman pick him up from the airport, and then from there they go to a nearby hotel. And while they're on the way to the desk to like get set up with the hotel, there's a man that accidentally bumps into Price. Again, could be absolutely nothing, but is mentioned in the account by Perlman.
Yeah.
By way mentioned in the account by Milner by way of Perlman, who may or may not exist.
Yeah, like God. Okay.
So they end up getting the hotel situation set up, and they have dinner together. And after a little while, Pat claims he began to feel lousy, and says he's going to go to bed early. And around 5 o'clock on July 14th, 1975, Price calls Perlman with the hotel phone and asks him to come see him in his room 2 doors down. And I guess he had been in pain and was struggling to breathe. And so when he shows up, Price is complaining of like back and shoulder muscle pain, tenseness, all this stuff's knotted. And he's also having these like really bad stomach cramps and cramps in his back muscles. And despite all that, he was, I guess, coherent and not talking about pain in the chest or arms, which I think the idea here is to suggest that that's maybe not heart attack symptoms. And I guess Perlman, I don't know the details, but like he tried to help Price out in some way. And afterwards, Price was like, oh, I feel better. And Perlman, I guess, wants to call a doctor, but Price tells him no. And it's now, I guess, about 6:30 a.m. on the 14th. And so Perlman goes back to visit with his wife in his room, and they talk about what was going on. And they decide, in spite of Price's request, they're going to call a doctor. And Price then basically Perlman comes by Price's room, and they said, look, we called a doctor. And it had been 15 minutes since he had seen him. And when Perlman comes to tell him this, he goes in and he finds that Pat is like sitting upright in his bed. He's like stiff from the waist up, and he's staring straight forward. And apparently his face was very flushed, but Perlman describes him as looking calm. And he supposedly said to Perlman, quote, "I think I will be all right now." And then after he says this, his body like arcs backwards, and it's described that only the back of his head and his heels were actually touching the bed. And that he goes into
so he did like a full like fucking
Paranormal Activity fucking
like bridge,
yes,
like
The Exorcist,
like, or I was thinking like German suplex full bridge type thing going on here, but he was doing went through the fucking New Japan dojo. It seems
he just like fucking arches his back and convulses pretty severely, and then arcs again. And Perlman describes hearing a, quote, death rattle breath sound. And he gets to the bed and finds that Price is not breathing. So he starts to administer CPR. And after doing CPR for a little while, he runs to the telephone and calls for a house doctor and then goes back to continue CPR. Now, supposedly, Price began to breathe 4 times through this procedure, but each time the breath, as it was like his body like restarted, he would go into this like reverse arc, and the breathing would then cease again. And while this is all going down, at some point, hotel security shows up and finds him performing CPR, and they call 911 and ask for paramedics. And they end up moving Price from the bed to the floor. And when the paramedics show up and they like shock him, he describes that he has a convulsive reaction that practically brings Price's body off the ground. And there's so much shit here, but basically, they have like Price is like, Perlman is like holding Price's feet down, and the paramedics tell him like, hey, you should let go of him because the electricity could like pulse through to you, which I'm going to be real with you. I don't think that's true based on what I know about how this works, but maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but
make sure you just fucking make sure you're grounded and you'll be fine.
Right.
Wear rubber soles.
Well, yeah, put on the Beatles' Rubber Soul.
Yeah, there you go.
And that'll ground you emotionally, mentally.
The Beatles' Rubber Sole is really like the rubber-soled shoes for acid trips, you know?
Exactly.
It keeps you grounded.
Now, Perlman is like kind of confused, I guess, about that it had not, why he had like maintained this contact at all. I don't know what they're trying to say here, but he's like, I guess, confused about why he was holding him at all. And once the paramedics leave, he remembers that Price had told him to secure documents and like let Puthoff know. So he calls Puthoff and tells him what happened and repeats Price's instructions about all this stuff and how basically how everything looks shady. And he asks Puthoff, should I carry out these instructions? Puthoff tells him, yes, anything that you can find on there that says SRI on it, take it. Anything that looked like it had to do with remote viewing, or sorry, not remote viewing, but like a project, just pick it up. So Perlman, I guess, collects some papers from Price's suitcase. And this is before, hotel security shows up. At this point, I think he's like pronounced dead.
Okay.
And Perlman, I guess, like kind of scans this material and sees that it has SRI on it. There's a contract in there that's between Price, his son, and these SRI. There's some connection here that I don't quite understand to coal deposits in Utah, and a report from, I think, Price on their work at SRI. But he never like sees who this report is addressed to.
And you don't know what how the coal reports relate to like alien bases and shit?
No, it might have just been something that he had on him about something that he was working on in Utah. I don't really know.
Okay.
So this material that is like recovered is handed over to Puthoff in LA, who had flown out just specifically to get these documents. And Puthoff basically says, he points out that Price's case officer from the Office of Naval Intelligence is like, I guess, in the documents. And he also points out that when they're at the funeral, which like in the documentary, both Puthoff and Targ claim to have been to an open casket funeral, suggesting that they saw the body. But
yeah,
they also, Puthoff also, I guess, points out this case officer from the Office of Naval Intelligence at the funeral as well. And so Puthoff basically then tells Perlman, like, let's stop in Palo Alto and we can, like, talk. And so Perlman travels with his wife to Palo Alto late at night, and they get a motel room there. And then the next morning, Hal Puthoff calls him up, and he's like, I'm going to come join you for breakfast. And 2 hours later after that call, he joins them, and he says that he like had difficulties with something to do with his mother or his mother-in-law, and that's why there was the 2-hour time difference between calling them and telling he would be right over and his actual like arrival time. And Perlman, I guess, tries to talk about price with Puthoff. And Puthoff supposedly said to him, quote, let's wait until we get over to the house to talk about it. So they follow Puthoff to his house, and there his wife basically escorted them into what Frank would describe as a, quote, small library type room. And Puthoff like disappears for a moment. He excuses himself. He comes back 5 minutes later and then, quote, proceeded to tell me that the research didn't have anything to do with intelligence. And he insists that no intelligence agencies are involved at all, and that Price had definitely not been involved with them.
So, okay. So now we should have someone fully throwing out all of the information here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he also goes on to say that nothing was wrong at SRI with regards to Pat Price. And he had spoken with somebody who was supposedly Price's doctor on the telephone, and that this doctor had told Perlman and had told them that Price had this history of heart problems, and that he had a myocardial infarction,
I believe.
And this is a quote from Perlman. He says, quote, it seemed apparent to me that someone had gotten a hold of Puthoff and told him to shut up and not say anything to anybody and to do his best to convince Sherry, that's his wife, and I that there was nothing strange about this whole thing and that he had been instructed to do so in a room that could have been taped recorded. So There's a couple other weird little details. Like Perlman claims that when they ended up going to Portland after leaving LA, they noticed strange clicks on their telephone at home. And they also, I guess, answered the phone at one point, and they found that whoever they were speaking to was momentarily disconnected. And his wife claims to have overheard other voices engaged in a conversation about a tape running out.
So is that whole clicks thing for your phone wire being tapped, is that real?
I honestly don't know, actually. I have no idea.
That's a total like movie trope thing.
It is.
Like if you pick up the phone and you listen, like, and you can hear the click because it's them starting a physical fucking recording device.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if that, but like at that time it probably was the way to do it. So
yeah, I honestly don't know. But Perlman claims that for a while they observed a white van that was following them occasionally, and after this van would follow them for some time around their home and whatnot, their car would get broken into, and the material that he had retrieved on Price was stolen.
Oh, okay. So the evidence is gone.
Which
that's it.
The account in the documentary is like, it follows the same beats, but not as many details. Like they do mention that like there are these documents that are taken off of Price when he died. But this is the one where like this account is where we get this like, yeah, he had suspicious documents that Puthoff was being super weird about, and they were broken into a car and like taken, supposedly. Now, weirdly enough, the documentary takes the time to mention the Church Committee on Illegal CIA Activities Senate hearing of 1975, which I think also would eventually lead into a couple of years later, the MK Ultra hearings of 1977. So the CIA is under a lot of fire right now. And this hearing on the illegal CIA activities was the same year as Price's death. And in the documentary, they show a clip of the CIA being grilled about a so-called heart attack gun.
Yeah.
And this gun would supposedly fire a dart without the victim noticing, and it would induce something like a heart attack. So the documentary itself implicates the CIA pretty heavily. Now, around this same time in 1977, when the MK Ultra hearings are happening, there's an article that's published by James Coates in the Chicago Tribune titled "The CIA's Crystal Ball." And I just wanted to read a brief part of this. So here's what it says. The CIA financed a project in 1975 to develop a new kind of agent who could truly be called a spook. CIA Director Stanfield Turner has disclosed. The CIA chief said that the agency found a man who could see what was going on anywhere in the world through his psychic powers. Turner said CIA scientists and officials would show the man a picture of a place, and he would then describe any activity going on there at that time. The tight-lipped CIA chief wouldn't reveal how accurate the spook was, but said the agency dropped the project in 1975. He died, Turner said, and we haven't heard from him since. In a slightly but not much more serious vein, Turner confirmed that U.S. intelligence operatives have discovered that the Soviet Union is spending money and time researching whether occult and psychic methods could be used to spy on other nations. At a recent breakfast meeting with reporters, Turner declined to be specific but confirmed reports that the Russians are studying persons who claim to be able to read minds, teleport themselves into secret meetings, and foretell the future. Now, things get strange. This is the thing that is is like extra weird to me. Gets brought up in the documentary.
You caught yourself from saying it. You worked around it, you figured it out, and you moved on.
Some strange stuff here, right? So a few years later, things get a little more complicated when the FBI raids the Los Angeles office of the Church of Scientology, which I believe I mentioned in the previous episode. And when they do this, they find these records of briefings that apparently Pat Price, member of the church, had routinely given a senior Scientology official information about his SRI and CIA activities. These leaks, this information would include classified operations, the details of that stuff, and the names of undercover personnel that he had agreed to work with in these contracts, and he had also agreed to keep them secret. So Puthoff, I guess, is told in the late 70s that Price had just straight up betrayed them. He describes it as, quote, the biggest betrayal I have ever experienced. Price was feeding people in Scientology everything that they did.
Oh, wow.
And this is extra awkward because Puthoff and Swan were also at one point Scientologists, although now later on they would sort of deny it by just not talking about it. And this is the connection that brought Price into the SRI project.
Okay.
And so this whole raid on Scientology by the FBI, this had been an ongoing investigation for a while. And all kinds of, like, there were plea deals and jail terms surrounding all this. And it was basically that the church was alleged to have infiltrated U.S. government offices and had been stealing documents. And that this all sort of implicated Price as being a spy for Scientology.
Wow. Okay.
It gets worse because what some people believe is that if Scientology had effectively infiltrated government offices and all this stuff, there was a possibility, according to some people, that Price could have been fed documents by these people. And this is the information that would allow him to convince them that he could remotely view things and read minds. And okay, I can tell you that they did raid the FBI. They did raid Scientology. They did confirm that that Price had been feeding this information to people. Whether or not, like, I don't know enough about whether they had been so heavily infiltrated by Scientology that they could feed him the info
to like fake the test,
right? But it does make sense. Like, it would explain why he was so unbelievably accurate. At least this is one explanation.
If you don't believe he's just fucking psychic.
Right. And there's some interesting comments from Ken Kress, who I mentioned, who was like one of the CIA, handlers that was involved with the SRI project. Mm-hmm. And he says this. Whether Price's initial remote viewing of the NSA site in 1973 had merely been a dangle, that is, real information supplied by others, so that the psychic double agent ingratiates themselves and achieves a penetration which eventually returns even more important information to his handlers, he says that this moved him to wonder about all this, about whether he was this psychic double agent for Scientology. And Kress himself had been one of the many people criticized by skeptics that people within the CIA and at SRI were basically even the slightest amount of belief. This is like the Uri Geller thing. The slightest amount of belief would let these people convince them of a lot of crazy things.
Yeah.
And Kress, had been very enthusiastic about Price. Many people were. But again, this all ends with the reveal that Price betrayed them, and there is a possibility that it was all fucking faked.
Frank,
I'll tell you what I personally believe after reading this. I think that this is just... I think it functions similarly to how we've been describing it, where these people just get fooled. They even the mildest amount of wanting to believe opens you up to these people. And every account that you can find of people talking about this stuff, whether they were in the military or the CIA or whatever, they had on some level the mildest desire to believe that this was real.
If they have any intention of if you hope it's real, someone's going to come along that's being funded and pushed by the Scientologists to make you believe it.
I mean, I would kind of believe the Scientology thing of they fed him information, but that's even almost too fantastical to me. I don't know how deeply infiltrated these government positions were by Scientology. And so that might have to be another topic in another episode. But this all ends with the question, did they feed him info? Like I said, was Pat Price killed for sharing secrets with the church? We may never know. The other conspiracy that, again, has nothing to go on. He was killed by the KGB for being an amazing super spy psychic. And I kind of doubt that because he doesn't really have any connections to the Soviet Union. He also may have just died.
Yeah, he also just could have had heart disease and just died.
Yeah,
which
entirely
is,
possible.
It's unfortunate, but is seemingly a real possibility here.
Yeah. So that is where I'm going to end the story of Pat Price. I kind of skipped over some of the finer details. There's more to the story. But I hit the big beats, and it's a weird story, but I find it very entertaining.
I like this whole area of the psychic winter stuff is really interesting because it's dealing with it from a different perspective than a lot of the things that I've read. But it's so so much of it just comes down to it really feels like some government agents thought maybe there was something here and they just got tricked by a bunch of grifters, basically. And it just basically turned into a weird niche place for certain people to make money from the government in the late 70s,
Yeah,
80s, whenever this was.
It's very interesting, and there's so much more, and I'll get into it over time. But I sense my break from Psychic Winter's coming up. I wanna mix it up.
Step out into the sunshine,
thank
Kyle.
you.
Step out into the light
Thank
and
you.
the warmth of topics that aren't beating your head against the same thing for months at a time.
Yeah, no, you're right. I have a tendency to do that and fixate and obsess and just it's just how I am. All right.
Yeah.
But I do need to step back from this soon. So who knows what my next topic will be? We'll see. We'll see. With that, Niall, are you ready for a big question?
Oh, always.
Excellent. Well, I have a really good one today. I'll say it.
That you definitely wrote ahead of time.
No, I did write this one ahead of time. But
you did? Oh, good.
It's a good one. If you had to be assassinated by the CIA, what would you like to be assassinated for?
For, not with. Okay.
Yeah, not with. For. What did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah.
What would be like the funniest way? What would be the funniest thing that I could do to get murdered by my government?
It's a good question, I think.
Yeah. Like there's always the thing of like pantsing a president, you know?
Sure.
Like something like that that's just you're not actually harming anyone, but you're doing something for the bit that just happens to also get you murdered by really like highly trained tactical people. But I don't like I feel like I have to say comedy podcast like 16 times around that statement alone. But it's yeah, like I'm not actually doing anything. But I feel like if you tried to pants Joe Biden, he would just like fall over and break something.
He might, he might hurt himself.
Not our sturdiest president.
Yeah, and you know he'd be fucking dusting himself off, trying to pull up his Jinko jeans over his American Eagle boxers, all like, "Come on, man."
Yeah. What if? Okay, actually, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. What if you what if you were to run an ice cream shop frequented by the president, and you just like slowly like slicked laxatives into
just gave him lots of diarrhea?
Yeah, and then you know, over time they find out about your plot and just take you out.
The CIA is just like, this dude's given the president a chronic diarrhea condition. I think we're gonna have to kill this guy, unfortunately.
Why? This guy's given the president so much laxatives that it's actively interfering with foreign policy briefings. So we have to take him out. I don't know why I'm going specifically to the president.
No,
why am I
mean,
doing this?
that's gonna get the CIA's attention, right? And I think it's funny too because like he's gonna be like, there's gonna be some like heavily like media like publicized event where he like announces the fact that he has diarrhea. Yeah, you know, he's gonna forget where he is, and he's gonna be like, I gotta shit my pants, man.
What if he falls up the stairs of Air Force
and
One
just
again
sprays
and
diarrhea everywhere?
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably get assassinated for feeding Joe Biden
We're both
dick
gonna feed
shrinking
Joe Biden
disease.
thing?
Come on, man, my dick shrink and I'm spraying diarrhea everywhere.
You think he's still using that thing?
Yeah, probably. I'm not well, but like he's probably fucking slapping that thing around and occasionally gets some blood in there that he can like do something with.
By chance.
Yeah. But I'm gonna shrink that fucking thing. Okay. And he's going to have a tiny dick and a butt filled with diarrhea.
And both podcasters here are going to get like It Gets Weird will be no more after this. just try. You know what's funnier than trying to give the leader of the quote free world just a really bad time? Not like hurt him, but just like
bad
give him a
time.
bad weekend.
Well, it gets worse because like you can see how the election's gonna go. Trump's gonna be all like, my opponent has a very tiny penis and he's constantly shitting himself. I always end up doing Bernie when I try to do Trump.
A little bit. Yeah.
And it's going to be, that's going to really lose him the election, I think. I mean, there's other stuff. Like, I think, funding genocide has been a huge pain point for his administration. But
really dug his heels in on that one. Holy shit.
So let's give him diarrhea and a tiny penis.
Yeah. All right.
Anyways,
I guess that's where we're gonna end this one.
Comedy podcast.
Fucking
We have no.
thing.
I would just like to make it very clear to our CIA handlers that we do not have any way to give him diarrhea or a tiny penis, and we won't if we could. This is all a joke. So.
Yes. On that note, after we've made it clear that we have no intentions to cause any problems for anyone in real life, we'll go and take care of some business. So if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcast to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and we're probably there.
Follow me on twitch.tv/itgetsweird, where sometimes I play video games. Come check it out. We get the people who listen to the show in the chat, and they're talking about Bigfoot while I'm playing Pokemon or whatever. It's great. itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Send us an email. It might get read on the show. Give it a shot. Finally, patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to our show, It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're discussing the weird TV show. You know it and you love it, The X-Files, Season 2. And you get to vote on what weird show we watch in between seasons. So check that out. At the $5 tier, you get access to another show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. We actually just watched, by the time you heard this, we just watched No One Will Save You, the alien abduction horror movie. So check that out. And we discuss it on there. So there's always bonus content up on our Patreon. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out with listeners, chatting about all kinds of stuff, from Bigfoot to UFOs to conspiracies. It's all on there. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Thanks for doing what you do. Here's a $1. Here's a tip. Thank you. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird Podcast.
All right. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.